Oh, there he goes. Jesus.
Imagine a piece of footage so bold, so unexpectedly clear that even seasoned scientists leaned in, slowed it down, and whispered that impossible phrase, "This can't be fake." Now imagine the person behind it. Not a showman, not a fame hunter, but a man walking alone through the dense Pacific Northwest, camera in hand, breathing just a little too fast, as if he knew something monumental was seconds away. That is where our story begins. A lone figure, a trail thick with mud, and an encounter that would ripple through cryptozoology for decades. The 1994 Paul Freeman recording isn't just another shaky clip in the wilderness. For many experts, it became a keystone, a rare moment where visual evidence collided with physical proof so precise that it shattered the usual dismissal. They didn't just watch it, they analyzed it, dissected it, challenged it, and then admitted the evidence held. This film isn't treated as gossip, it's treated as data. And today, with AI scrutinizing every frame, we're forced to ask a dangerous question. What if Freeman really did capture something undiscovered? The making of an obsession. Before Paul Freeman became a legendary figure in the Bigfoot community, he lived a life shaped by rugged landscapes and long patrols.
There was a tracks here in the mud where I think he was going to get a drink, or I don't know, maybe he was going to cross there or something. But anyway, I must have scared him.
Born in the early 1940s, he eventually joined the U.S. Forest Service, learning the land the way a surgeon knows anatomy. Every contour, every quiet shift in the wind, every path carved by creatures that lived unseen. Then came June 10, 1982. Freeman reported seeing something towering, covered in hair, and undeniably alive near Walla Walla, Washington. Some laughed, others leaned forward. But whether people believed him or not, that day rewired him. Something had looked back at him from the trees, and he refused to let the moment fade. For more than 20 years, he walked those forests with a relentless focus most people never understood. Friends called it dedication. Critics called it an obsession. Freeman didn't care. He was out there anyway, documenting, studying, casting footprints, and enduring ridicule that would have broken someone less committed. But the truth is simple. Freeman kept returning to those woods because he knew what he'd seen. And he wanted proof. August 20th, 1994. A moment almost lost. On a quiet day in the Blue Mountains, northeastern Oregon, remote and restless, Freeman lifted his camera to record a peculiar line of footprints. They were wide, deep, astonishingly detailed. But he had filmed tracks before. He didn't expect what came next. He didn't expect the sudden shift in focus.
I started up the bank there and I heard brush and stuff popping up there.
Oh, there he goes.
It looked at me once.
Jesus.
He didn't expect the figure. Through the trees, walking with a rhythm almost too natural to comprehend, moved a massive bipedal creature, draped in dark hair that swayed with each step. It wasn't staggering like someone playing pretend. It wasn't stiff like a suit. It moved with weight, with momentum. You can almost feel the muscle under the fur. Freeman's breathing spikes, cracking the quiet. His shock bleeds through each second, raw, unrehearsed, undeniable. And then there's the stranger detail, the one analysts still debate, a smaller shape shadowing the larger figure. A juvenile? A companion? A trick of the foliage? The possibility sends a shiver down anyone watching the footage slowed down. Because if the smaller shape is real, then we're not looking at a solitary creature. We're looking at a family. Imprints that refuse to be ignored. Freeman didn't stop at filming. He collected the physical evidence the forest offered. Plaster casts of footprints so complex they pushed multiple scientists into uncomfortable honesty. These weren't simple impressions in mud. These weren't carved hoaxes made to fool weekend hikers. These casts held dermal ridges, tiny patterns, tiny swirls, biological fingerprint-like textures pressed into the earth by something heavy, warm, and alive. And that's what changed everything. Dr. Grover Krantz, a respected physical anthropologist, examined those ridges with a level of scrutiny few could replicate. He pointed out the natural flow patterns, the subtle anatomical consistencies, details so meticulously correct that anyone creating them artificially would need knowledge, skill, and equipment far beyond what Freeman had access to in the early 90s. If the casts were fake, The hoaxer would have needed the precision of a forensic sculptor and the anatomical intuition of a primate specialist. Yet the person who found them was a forest patrolman with a camcorder and plaster powder. The math didn't add up. Dr. Jeff Meldrum pushed the investigation even further. As an expert in primate locomotion and anatomy, he studied pressure points, toe splay, and flexible movement embedded in the casts, dynamic features that simply shouldn't appear in artificially crafted footprints. He concluded that the biomechanics captured in those ridges weren't the work of a trickster. They were the signatures of a moving foot, a living one. Then came fingerprint expert Benny Kling. After inspecting the same casts, he didn't just question whether they could be faked. He implied that if someone could counterfeit such fine ridge detail, they'd be better suited to forging currency than muddy footprints. And after examining them again, he removed all doubt. No human hand could have crafted them. The hoax accusation that fell apart. Whenever remarkable evidence surfaces, skepticism follows like a shadow. With Freeman's material, critics did what critics always do. They assumed trickery, dismissed his findings, and tried to squeeze the phenomenon into familiar shapes. The argument was simple. If footprints were found and a creature was filmed, then perhaps Freeman sculpted the impressions, staged the scene, or misinterpreted something ordinary. But that theory collapsed under scientific examination. To fabricate the casts, Freeman discovered, a person would need to replicate dermal ridge flow, skin whorls, shifting pressure points, and toe flexibility, all built into an imprint left in natural terrain. Dr. Grover Krantz didn't entertain this lightly. He explained that recreating such minute biological intricacies would require knowledge of primate dermatology and fabrication techniques that the average wilderness researcher in the early 90s would not possess. Krantz made it clear, the anatomical depth present in the casts wasn't compatible with amateur forgery, and Meldrum reinforced that conclusion, pointing to patterns in the tracks that revealed movement, not static stamping, not repeated molds, but living mobility, toe spread under weight, pressure signatures, bending mechanics, the kind of subtle details that happen only when a real foot interacts with soil. Even more striking, a fingerprint specialist saw the same traits. After a second look, he dropped any hesitation and stated the obvious. These weren't man-made. So the hoax theory didn't just weaken, it disintegrated. The misidentification myth. When fraud accusations fail, skeptics often shift to a softer claim. Maybe the tracks belonged to a known animal. Maybe the creature was just a bear. But movement leaves clues, and bodies move differently. Freeman's footage doesn't show the hallmarks of a bear stumbling on two legs. The creature walks steadily, rhythmically, with limbs swinging in a manner that betrays balance and coordination foreign to regional wildlife. And the tracks? They contradict every known animal in the area. Meldrum emphasized that the heel structure, arch shape, and toe layout diverged sharply from bear anatomy. Bears don't leave behind ridges that flow like primate skin. They don't show toe spacing consistent with a flexible biped. They don't hide their claws in the mud. A bear print looks like a bear print. These did not. The misidentification explanation evaporated under the weight of its own limitations. The most persistent attempt to dismiss the evidence didn't target the casts or the film. It targeted the man. Critics argued that Freeman wanted the legend to be true so badly that he might have exaggerated or fooled himself. But that argument ignores the full picture. Freeman wasn't a reckless thrill-seeker wandering around convincing himself a myth was real. He was a Forest Service patrolman who tracked wildlife for a living. He knew prints. He knew gait patterns. He knew the silence of the woods and what breaks it. He didn't seek celebrity status. He endured ridicule. He didn't crave attention. He simply didn't back down. And the astonishing part? His credibility didn't rest solely on his own word. Independent experts validated his findings. His tracks held consistent anatomical patterns seen by multiple scientists. His footage captured locomotion that matched primate biomechanics. Krantz defended his work publicly, not out of sentiment, but because the evidence demanded it. He argued that the footprints Freeman presented achieved a degree of realism that could not be dismissed as clumsy fakery. Meldrum echoed the same point. He wrote that the casts displayed features, like midfoot flexibility and pressure dynamics, that reveal function, not sculpture. And then there's the context. Freeman didn't work in isolation. Numerous hunters, local officials, and researchers in the Blue Mountains had reported parallel sightings. Freeman's encounters didn't emerge from a vacuum. They sat among a chorus of testimonies from people familiar with the land. In other words, his credibility wasn't an island. It was part of a landscape of consistent witness accounts. Standing beside the legends. The Freeman footage often gets compared to another giant of the field, the Patterson-Gimlin film. The latter is iconic, but Freeman's recording carries something uniquely powerful, a combination of moving imagery and physical impressions analyzed by experts. The two films share a striking similarity, an anatomy that resists easy dismissal. Krantz and Meldrum both noted that the creature in Freeman's footage doesn't move like a person in a costume. The limb proportions, the swing of its arms, the bend of its knees, they align with expectations for a large bipedal primate, not a stunt actor tripping through the brush. Most alleged Bigfoot footage lacks corroborating evidence. Freeman's didn't. He had the casts, he had the footage, he had expert evaluations. Together, they form a rare synergy, a case where independent evidence supports what the camera captured. Scientists looked at both and found consistency, not contradiction. If you believe the tracks, the footage becomes harder to deny. If you believe the footage, the tracks become a map of something extraordinary. Either way, the story points in the same direction. The body that never appeared, and why it doesn't end the debate. One of the most common criticisms leveled at Bigfoot research is the absence of a recovered body. No skeletons, no preserved remains, no undeniable specimen. But the absence of remains isn't the knockout blow skeptics imagine. Nature doesn't preserve bodies kindly. Decomposition destroys tissue. Scavengers scatter bones. Soil acidity dissolves what's left. Even large, well-documented animals like mountain lions and bears leave shockingly little behind, and they're animals whose existence nobody questions. Meldrum addressed this directly. He remarked that during field investigations, even in areas known to be full of bears, intact skeletons are astonishingly rare. The forest eats evidence, the forest erases, and that's for animals that don't go out of their way to avoid people. If a large, intelligent primate actively evades human contact, the chances of finding remains shrink further. The argument collapses when viewed through the lens of real wilderness ecology. Bodies vanish, evidence decays, life returns to soil, quietly and quickly. So the missing body isn't proof of absence, it's a reminder of nature's efficiency. The Minnesota Iceman, the body that should have changed everything. We arrive now at one of the most unsettling chapters in the entire Bigfoot phenomenon, a chapter that should have rewritten textbooks, challenged biological assumptions, and forced scientific institutions to confront what they'd been ignoring for decades. But instead, it vanished into silence, buried under skepticism, pushed aside as an inconvenience, lost because it didn't fit the accepted map of reality. This is the story of the Minnesota Iceman, displayed across the United States in traveling exhibitions throughout the 1960s and 70s. It wasn't a blurry photograph or a distant silhouette. It was a full body, a massive, hair-covered hominid sealed inside a block of ice. Not a legend, not a rumor, a tangible form with shoulders, limbs, facial structure, and proportions no known ape or human could replicate. Its features were disturbing in their clarity: broad hands, large feet, facial characteristics that diverged dramatically from any modern human, a wound, as if whatever this creature was, it had died violently. People stared at it through the frost, not knowing what they were really seeing. And here is where the story shifts from curiosity to scientific confrontation. Two prominent zoologists, respected for their rigor and expertise, studied the specimen directly. Dr. Bernard Heuvelmans, regarded as a foundational figure in the study of hidden or unknown species, examined the figure encased in ice. He compared anatomy, proportions, and morphological traits with known primate families, and his conclusion was unwavering. He believed it represented a type of hominid that had never been classified. Independent of him, Dr. Ivan Sanderson, another reputable zoologist, came to the same conclusion. He verified details that couldn't be sculpted: the patterns of hair growth, the structure of hands and feet, the shape of the skull, and the muscular distribution visible beneath the ice. Heuvelmans later published his findings, writing that every characteristic he observed aligned with a biological organism. His analysis described hand and foot proportions unlike any modern primate, as well as facial measurements that dismissed the idea of fabrication. In a world driven by evidence, the Iceman should have ignited a serious investigation. Instead, it vanished from public view, dismissed, ignored, forgotten. But the implications remained. If one scientifically documented hominid specimen was brushed aside because it didn't fit conventional expectations, how many other discoveries were overlooked the same way? How much evidence has been neglected simply because it was inconvenient? And in that question, we find the bridge back to Paul Freeman. The Iceman demonstrates something uncomfortable. Even a body, a literal physical body, can be shoved into obscurity if it contradicts expectations. So when critics demand a specimen, as though that would instantly erase doubt, they ignore history. A body was found, it was studied, and the world looked away anyway. The pattern becomes clear, not just in the Iceman case, not just in Freeman's story, but in the broader reaction to anything that hints at an unrecognized primate species. A barrier rises, not of logic, but of stigma. Dr. Grover Krantz called out this contradiction with striking bluntness. If the same evidence appeared in another part of the world, Africa, for instance, accompanied by claims from locals, mainstream anthropology would investigate seriously. Explorers would mobilize, grants would be issued, and the academic world would treat the matter as a legitimate search for an unknown species. But because the evidence surfaced in North America, it was dismissed before analysis even began. That isn't science. It's biased. Krantz wasn't arguing for belief. He was arguing for consistency, for the idea that investigation should follow the trail of evidence, not the boundary of cultural expectation. Freeman's casts held anatomical traits that matched primate physiology. His footage captured coordinated bipedal locomotion inconsistent with a costume. Experts in multiple fields verified biological realism, and yet mainstream channels hesitated. The reluctance wasn't rooted in evidence. It was rooted in reputation. No institution wants to be the first to admit something massive might be moving through North American forests. The social cost is too high, the ridicule is too loud, the media is too eager to laugh. So the safe choice is to ignore, dismiss, and pretend the puzzle pieces don't fit. But they do. And as more technology enters the conversation, from high-resolution AI video enhancement to deep biomechanical modeling, the evidence becomes harder to overlook. Patterns emerge that skeptics once claimed were impossible. What happens when AI begins to confirm what humans avoided? What happens when digital analysis refuses to play along with outdated assumptions? We may be entering that era right now. Why Freeman's film still matters. Freeman's 1994 footage isn't treated as a relic. It's treated as a foundation, a rare intersection between visual evidence and physical proof, examined by professionals who staked their reputations on honesty, not sensationalism. He spent decades in the woods because he believed something extraordinary lived there. He found tracks. He collected casts. He filmed a creature. Independent experts, anthropologists, anatomists, and forensic specialists studied the data and found consistency. The anatomical realism surpassed what a hoaxer could replicate. The biomechanical movements contradicted the idea of a human in costume. The physical details in the casts aligned with primate biology in ways that defied simple fabrication. And then there's the larger context. The Blue Mountains weren't silent. Witness after witness, hunters, officers, and researchers reported similar encounters across the region. Freeman didn't create a legend. He walked into one that already existed. His evidence stands on its own, but it doesn't stand alone. So we return to the forest, to that muddy trail, to the moment the camera wobbled and captured something impossible striding between the trees. We return to the scientists who studied the prints and said the words nobody expected. These features are too detailed, too anatomical, too biologically correct to be faked. We return to the paradox that has haunted cryptozoology for decades. If the evidence is so precise, if experts keep confirming details, then what exactly are we looking at? Freeman believed he knew, and after examining the evidence, many scientists quietly agreed. Something walked those woods, something left those prints, something with weight, intention, muscle, and presence, something we still haven't named. As we sift through the final layers of Freeman's story, the evidence takes on a different weight. Not just fascinating, not just mysterious, but quietly insistent. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention. It simply exists, steady and immovable, no matter how many times the world tries to brush past it. What Freeman documented cannot be undone. What scientists verified cannot be erased. What the camera captured continues to echo, frame by frame, through every debate that followed. The forest holds its secrets, but sometimes it gives one back. And in 1994, it gave Freeman something extraordinary.